Are you still having a hard time with Guile, in spite of all the attempts you've made through ranks and watching high-level players, studying their gameplay? Well, in this video, we're going to go over 3 reasons why you're losing with Guile, so let's get straight to it. All that being said, if you enjoy educational content like this and want to see more, then be sure as always to like, comment, and subscribe. As well, if you want to take part in one-on-one private coaching through me, then be sure to check out the link in the description, sign up now, and become a part of the new academy. Let's get straight to the first point. First reason why you are struggling and losing with Guile is because you lack spatial awareness. Now, what does that really mean? Well, Guile as a character is all about controlling the space on the battlefield via his sonic booms, but also through his normals. And so you, the player, are likely lacking in this area because you're not able to really distinguish the distance between you and your opponent carefully enough to where you're allowing your opponent to surpass your booms or surpass your neutral game to where they can open you up and therefore do a lot of damage. So you're losing a lot, you're hard stuck because you're not really focusing on where you're positioning yourself in relation to your opponent. And as Guile, you have to constantly be aware of this, because if you just make one small misstep in your approach, it can cost you. It can prevent you from doing a safe anti-air. It can prevent you from doing a safe poke. All of these things contribute to your losses because the more and more you become very one-dimensional, very tunnel vision in your approach, that is, you're too dependent on one way of doing something. That is, you're throwing too many booms, you're too predictable, and therefore now you're just easily telegraphed by the enemy. So you need to be thinking of solutions as to how to properly position yourself with Guile, throwing your booms, but not just throwing any booms. It's important to also know the space in which you have with every single boom you throw, whether it be a light version, medium version, heavy version, or OD version. And also making good use of your drive rush to follow your booms to therefore create space, limit the amount of space the enemy has, so on and so forth, because you also want to create that pressure. And so that being said, let's move on to the next important point. Now you're probably thinking, but Nu, you just said that Guile's a defensive character, but I'm lacking in offensive pressure? What do you mean by this? Well, surprisingly enough, Guile actually has some pretty surprising offensive pressure in regards to how you utilize drive rush, but also drive impact. A lot of players have argued that Guile doesn't really make use of the game's mechanics, but I'd have to beg to differ depending on how you utilize it. Drive rush can be very useful in closing the gap between you and the enemy, and drive impact can be really good as far as just surprising the opponent, opening them up for a nice big combo. So it really all comes down to how you maximize and utilize the mechanics well enough to further establish control and pressure. So while Guile definitely wants to be sitting back and throwing booms and applying pressure defensively in that sense, you can also use the approach offensively, where you can follow your booms, like as I mentioned before, with your drive rush, and just applying pressure by closing the gap and denying the enemy space to therefore force them to making poor decisions, i.e. jumping in, trying to avoid your booms. You can use your normals to poke them out. Guile has really good tools to play offensively. Now, that isn't to say that you should completely just avoid being defensive and go all in offensively. It really comes down to balance. So you need to understand how to effectively play offensively with Guile, and the best way to do that is to first understand your defensive approach. So slowing things down, really paying attention once again to the space in which you are trying to control, and once you've controlled that space, once the enemy now recognizes that they have little options to choose from, that is when now you can utilize drive rush to close the gap. You can use drive impact to mix things up, and then once you trap them, now you can start maybe jumping in a little bit, applying some pressure, and then once the opponent adapts to that, try and back away, reset, go back to defensive mode, reset and do your whole boom, space, zoning control. And then again, once they open up to bad habits, then you can take initiative and apply pressure once again. So in short, you're lacking offensive pressure because you're being too defensive. You're being too reliant on one particular method, which is to throw too many sonic booms. So you need to be able to, once again, apply pressure, apply that aggression when necessary, and then back away once you start to realize the opponent starting to making some adjustments, because you need to adjust as well. So it's always a back and forth between you and the enemy. Learn to adjust, and then again, apply consistent pressure when needed. So that being said, let's move on to the last and final point. One of the biggest mistakes that I happen to come across when coaching Guiles is you play with no patience whatsoever. Guile really excels when the player is patient and waiting for opportunities to strike. Yes, you can play offensive with Guile, but that requires you to play very strong defense to find the right openings and capitalize off of player mistakes. But you're trying to jump in, you're trying to apply unnecessary pressure, you're closing the gap when you don't need to, and as a result, you now get opened up, and now you have to play defensively. You're forced to play defensively as opposed to being more relaxed, playing defensively in a patient manner, rather than now you're all flimsy, you're impatient, and as a result of your impatience, now you have to back up. Now you start to get too passive because now you're scared, and that's going to cost you the game. So you're playing passively because you are too predictable and you lose patience. And when you lose patience, you get opened up like a can of worms, and as a result, you falter. So you really have to fine tune your defense. And once you've mastered and developed the art of how to play with more patience, how to mix up your approach in terms of your booms, the speed in which you utilize your booms, once again, using drive rush, using drive impact, using your normals to poke and apply pressure in that way. Just mixing things up will confuse the opponent and therefore allow you to adjust, adapt, and therefore take initiative when needed. So if you are finding yourself losing patience, you're getting a little bit too antsy, a little bit too flustered, take a step back, breathe a little bit, and understand that Guile excels when he just needs to sit back and just chill. And then once you find that the opponent is getting impatient, remember, you want to be the one who's patient. Let the opponent hang themselves. Don't be the victim of your own wrongdoings. Play patiently. Don't be too passive and just throw booms all day. Really try to mix things up. You have a vast array of tools at your disposal. Maximize your profits, and from there, you'll see the victories that you deserve. So all that being said, I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. Again, if you'd like to receive one-on-one private coaching, be sure to check out the link in the pinned comments. Sign up now to be a part of the new academy. And as always, new warriors, stay strong and keep fighting. Peace.